now my pleasure and honor to introduce our presenter this evening for the second installment of his two-part presentation titled Karpman's Drama Triangle and Radical Responsibility. Fleet Maull, PhD, CMTP, is an author, mindfulness teacher, management consultant, trainer, and executive coach who facilitates deep transformation for individuals and organizations through his philosophy and program of radical responsibility. Dr. Maull currently serves as the CEO and Director of Training, Research, and Development for Prison Mindfulness Institute, Center for Mindfulness in Public Safety, and the Engaged Mindfulness Institute. As well, he is the founder and CEO of Heart-Mind Institute and Windhorse Seminars and Consulting. Dr. Maull is a pioneer and thought leader in the mainstream mindfulness movement, developing cutting-edge mindfulness-based and trauma-informed leadership trainings, transformational seminars, and consulting and coaching programs that he delivers in diverse business, nonprofit, and government settings, including his pioneering work in developing mindfulness-based emotional intelligence and mindfulness-based wellness and resiliency training programs. Dr. Maull is a certified professional mindfulness teacher and an advisory board member with the International Mindfulness Teachers Association and a board member with the Institute for Organizational Mindfulness. Thanks so much for joining us this evening, Fleet.
Thank you, John. And thank you, Robert, as always. And thank you, Sandy, for that wonderful guided practice. So this is the second of a two-part series. And I think probably the majority of our wonderful friends who are here this evening were not there the last time. So may need to do a little bit of review. John, can you give me our screen sharing privileges?
You should have that now, Fleet, I believe.
Okay.
Yep.
So what we covered in the session 2 weeks ago was Stephen Karpman's Drama Triangle, and which I feel is a very powerful psychological insight. And Stephen Karpman is still with us, and you can look him up and see some of his material directly. But he developed this many years ago, decades ago, and it's been so helpful in all the work I do. And it's one of the things that people really grab onto because it's just so simple and so clear and helps us understand really the dynamics of human suffering and of a lot of the conflict we get into and a lot of the unnecessary negative drama in our lives and toxic drama. And it's built around the triangulation of these three mindsets here. Very important to realize these are not names for people. We're not calling people victims, persecutors, or rescuers. These are mindsets that we all gravitate through from time to time. And you know, this is the core of any melodrama. This is, you know, the hero, the villain, the victim. You know, this is, so it's at the heart of all our great literature and a good whodunit, crime procedural show, what have you. And it may be very entertaining to watch it on the big screen, but sometimes it may not be so entertaining to be in the midst of it. It can be. In fact, we get addicted to drama. In fact, that's one of the reasons why our most popular television genres have, you know, just full of drama, often very kind of superficial, toxic drama, like your average reality TV show. So there can be an adrenaline rush getting involved in drama, and we can kind of get addicted to the neurochemical mix that's in our brain when we're triggered emotionally and caught up in dramas. But then, you know, there's always often the peak of experiencing that peak, and then there's a slide, you know, coming back down where often we feel a lot of negative feelings toward ourselves and others, and there's just so much suffering there. And so just very simply, the victim mindset is where I'm really assuming that I'm upset about something and I'm assuming the cause is someone or something outside myself, and thus giving my power away. And because I can't control that which is outside of myself, the only place I have any real influence is with myself, and that's hard enough because of our conditioning and habitual patterns, but at least we do have that possibility with ourselves. But it's just instinctual to deflect blame and to imagine I'm angry because somebody's doing something, and And we feel that sense of powerlessness and helplessness, and then we look for somebody to blame for it. And that someone or something that we blame, that's then the persecutor. And then often we look for someone to rescue us, or ally with us against the imagined or designated persecutor. So these are mindsets that we all go through, and they're really driven by the victim mindset, because when I gravitate towards, the persecutor mindset, when Fleet's doing his persecutor thing, I'm getting into controlling and judging and dominating behaviors. The context is I'm right and you're wrong. And why do I go there? What am I looking for? Well, I'm looking for control. I'm looking for power. Well, why would I need to go looking for control or power? Well, obviously, because underneath that, I feel powerless or out of control. And what position is that? The victim mindset. The same thing with the rescuer. Now, here we're not talking about a legitimate rescue where there's a mining accident or an avalanche and people need rescuing. Here we're talking about the psychological rescuer, where I'm ostensibly helping someone, but I need to do it from up here. And we need to be really clear. Hey, I'm the rescuer. I'm the victim. I'm the savior. Don't forget that. Who are you? You're the victim. Stay down. No. Stay down there, because otherwise I'll be out of a job. Now, none of us are pure rescuers, but probably very few of us are pure helpers either. And to the extent that our helping behaviors get conflated with that psychological rescuer who's getting their ego needs met, and that's the way I feel strong and secure and powerful, because I'm the fixer, I'm the savior, right? I know. The context is I know and you don't. I'm the expert, I'm the fixer. And so the extent that I'm doing that, I'm enabling someone else to stay in the victim mindset. I'm colluding with the rescuer mindset, colludes with the victim mindset. And my helping could actually end up being very disempowering, even demeaning to others. So it's really important to, especially for those of us in the helping professions, to untangle our natural helping behaviors and genuine altruistic motivations from any of that psychological rescuer mentality. And we'll probably never be able to be totally free of it, but at least we have that awareness, and we're not letting that really drive things, right? And we can learn to support people in a more straightforward way, which we're going to talk about in a moment. Anyway, this is the drama triangle. And it's like, you imagine you're at work and you're really upset, and you perceive it's because something your coworker is doing or your boss is doing, and you're really upset, and I'm upset, and it's unfair, and it's and it's a jerk, and you're my boss, and and then what do? Do I go over to my coworker or my boss and say, hey, we need to sit down and work this through? Probably not. Most times we go find somebody else to complain to, somebody to commiserate with us. So that's the rescuer. And once we do that, the triangle is formed. And once it forms, it starts to spin. And, we don't have time tonight, but often we put people in threes or have you act out drama triangles. And it was just classic dramas that we get involved in and work or at home. And people always have the experience that triangle will just spin forever. It creates a toxic black hole of negativity. And there's no way out. It'll just spin forever. In fact, it'll start to spin off other drama triangles. How many of you have had the experience with somebody else at home or at work or in your social set who's got a big drama going on, and you feel yourself getting pulled into it? It's almost like they're going, come on, the drama triangle with us, right? You just feel it, because once it forms, it starts sucking in people and time and money and resources and energy. And this undermines families, leads to divorce, really harms children, undermines organizations, can put organizations and companies out of business, and it plays out on the world stage as endless drama, right? And now we have, who would imagine we were going to have land war again in our lifetimes in Europe? And here we have a land war in Europe with the invasion of Ukraine, and seems pretty clear there is a real persecutor here, a real bully, Putin, and there seems to really be true victimization, and of course there is the urge to want to come in and support, and all that is normal and natural, and that may be very real. And we can overlay that with all this psychology and actually make things worse and just perpetuate it. In our attempts to fix it, we'll just set up the next drama and the next drama, and then not in any way to justify in any way, shape, or form what's going on there. But it's not hard to understand that conflict has its roots in World War II and World War I and all the collective trauma and the whole history of the division of Europe into Eastern and Western Europe and the collapse of the Soviet Union. This stuff just goes on and goes on and goes on, right? And it's these drama triangles just spinning and spinning and spinning off other drama triangles, and so it's human suffering. And so we talked last week about how, when we recognize we're caught in a drama, How do we get out of it? Well, first we have to recognize it. Then we stop, take a breath, find some way to state shift a bit, get unhooked from the reptilian brain control, the fight or flight response, some deep breathing, do some meditation like Sandy was leading us in, find our breath, count to 10, do anything to get a little space and to go, okay, what do I want to do here? Do I want to continue with this drama, or do I want to create some space, make some boundaries? And then we talked about ways that we can get clear about what we're feeling and what we're needing and further de-escalate ourselves, and then maybe even be de-escalated enough and get enough clarity about what really hooked us in there in the first place and what's really going on at the level of basic human needs that we all share, that maybe we could come back and have a reasonable conversation with someone. But maybe not. Maybe we just have to make a boundary and say, I'm not going there. I don't want to participate. Right. So, that's a quick introduction to Karpman's Drama Triangle. And it's a very powerful psychological distinction, because once we see it's everywhere. And then we have the possibility to make boundaries with it. I'm walking down the hall. Here's a big drama. I'm just going to go the other way. Right. I'm not going to participate in that drama today. A little less suffering in my life, and learning how not to create it ourselves. And when we do find ourselves caught in it, learning how to get untangled. Like when we swallow the hook, what we call the drama hook, how do we get the hook out of our mouth? And how do we learn to recognize the drama hooks so we don't swallow them? We see it, we know we really want to swallow it, we're really, but we let it go. A little less suffering in our life, a little less drama, right? So what we're talking about tonight, though, is having understood something there about the drama triangle. How do we make a shift? If I can get this thing to work for me. There we go. So, I'm going to go through some of this kind of a little bit quickly. So when we are hooked in a drama and we're convinced, that I'm upset, I'm being victimized, other people are causing it, these are some of the themes that we'll find running in our head, right? And they may be very valid on some level, and they certainly feel valid, right? We feel taken advantage of, misunderstood, or people are breaking agreements, or there's deception, dishonesty. All these things could be going on. And then what kind of feelings do we have? This is the landscape of emotions that we experience, and this is very valid. Now, it's based on perception. It's important to understand that our emotions, actually, we assume often they're caused by people and things outside ourselves, but actually they arise based on our perception of our needs being met or not. And when I perceive my basic need for food, warmth, shelter, respect, connection, love, belonging, relationship, autonomy, space, all these common human needs we all share, when I perceive my needs are getting met, I have all the warm and fuzzy emotions: content, peaceful, happy, glad. When I perceive my needs are being blocked or thwarted or challenged in some way, then I start having all these kind of feelings over here, right? And so it's based on perception, and my perception may be more or less accurate. At best, my perceptions are a limited interpretation of a limited set of the available data, and my interpretation is based on a lot of assumptions and past history and past conditioning. So it's not to invalidate any of this we're experiencing, but it's just to open it up and really look at it, because then we have the possibility of not just being trapped in it. So this is kind of what the drama zone looks like. We have the drama triangle down here. We get caught in behaviors like blaming others instead of owning our own choices and results, justifying our own behaviors to others, holding on to old feelings of resentment, storing them up like ammunition, shaming ourselves, blaming ourselves, or being hooked on being right. And we love to be right, don't we? It's really addictive being right. And we'll get divorced over being right. We'll lose our kids over being right. We go to war over being right, right? And this just creates this world of chaos and conflict. So what's the alternative? And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. The alternative is embracing this notion that I call radical responsibility. Could easily be called radical ownership. It could be called radical self-empowerment, for that matter. I describe it as voluntarily embracing 100% ownership or responsibility for each and every circumstance we face in life, day in and day out. Now, that includes the ones that we can see we had some role in. Either we maybe caused it, or we at least contributed to it, or we just allowed it to happen, or we set ourselves up for it unconsciously, or we just weren't paying attention, or whatever. We can see we had some relationship to it. But then there may be some circumstances that we just can't see we had any connection at all. Everybody would agree. It just landed on our head, right? We're just innocent bystander landing on our head. We're even going to own those. Why? Because it's the only place we have any real power. The only place we have any real power. We cannot control the world out there. We cannot control other people. How do we know we can't control other people? Well, we've tried, right? We've been trying our whole lives. It hasn't worked out very well. But we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that people are not controllable because we know we're not controllable. No matter how hard people try to intimidate us or control us, we will find our way, won't we? To get our needs met. We're very creative at getting our needs met. So staking our happiness on getting other people to do what we want them to do so that we can be happy is a prescription for suffering and disappointment. So instead, we look into how can I see where actually I did have some relationship to it and get as honest as I can. And this is not for the purpose of blame. This says radical responsibility. One of the key distinctions here is the distinction between ownership and blame, between ownership and blame. Radical responsibility has nothing to do with blaming others, obviously, but it has not one iota to do with blaming ourselves. And it's certainly not about blaming victims, right? So when we're trying to look in, did I have any relationship to it? Did I cause the situation, contribute to it? Did I unconsciously set myself up, promote it in some way? An unconscious life script I have from childhood. I'm setting myself up, getting stuck in that same dead-end job again, or getting stuck in that abusive relationship again and again, based on some kind of childhood scripts and programming. Or did I simply allow it by not paying attention? Was I people-pleasing, enabling? Did I not do my due diligence? Was I being conflict avoidant, which is a good way to end up in conflict, right? So we look into all this not for the purpose of blaming ourselves, not one iota. It's simply for learning. Because when I can understand how I got into a situation, I can better understand how to get out of it and how to avoid it in the future, right? I can see how I got from point A to B to C to D. Next time I'll turn right instead of left. I can make different decisions. So it's purely for the purpose of learning and insight. It has nothing to do with blame. And then again, there may be situations where we just can't see we had anything to do with it. And then, the second question is that maybe there's something that happens that's horrible, it's unjust, it's terrible, it's criminal, it happened to me, it shouldn't happen to anybody. And even, it's okay, even if I did have anything to do with it, it's still completely unjust, right? And so it's never about blaming ourselves, but there is this thing in my life that at some point the setting question is, what am I going to do with it? Am I going to let it take me down and get myself stuck in a victim mindset for a long time or forever? Or am I going to find the most creative way I can respond to this, even in my own enlightened self-interest, just to move my life forward, which could include seeking justice or making boundaries, but doing from a self-empowered place instead of from the victim mindset, right? So often in a process, I'll put people in dyads and I'll have them go through this whole, and then at this point, they've told a victim story from their life, a time when they felt they got the shaft, they got the wrong end of the stick, they were taken advantage of or something. And now I ask them to retell that story from a perspective of ownership. I ask them to look in and see, is there any way they can see that they caused it, contributed to it, promoted it, or allowed it? And then I ask them to share from that place, beginning with the pronoun I, which is the pronoun of ownership. So they start the new story from a place of, well, yeah, I can see I did kind of set myself up for that, or yeah, I was kind of enabling and people pleasing, or I didn't really do my due diligence, I didn't get an agreement, or I was doing, I just wasn't paying, I was being naive, I didn't have good boundaries, I didn't stick up for myself, I didn't speak up for myself, or what I, the pronoun of ownership, and we retell the story. And in doing so, we come up with different themes. These are some of the themes of ownership that commonly arise when people step into that ownership and get curious about what can they own in a situation. And we start recognizing, well, here's some of the things I was doing, or here's some of the things I didn't do, or here's some of the things I could have done that would have gotten different results. And then how do I feel? It's not like it's a rose garden here, but the feelings are different, right? It may feel very challenging or disorienting or confusing to step into this space of ownership, but also we may feel less helpless, less powerless, more empowered. Sometimes people experience a sense of calm and release. Or maybe when we recognize our part in something, we have some regret or embarrassment, or we may feel like we're learning something, a greater sense of understanding. We may feel wiser, more reasonable, more resilient, and so forth. So it's kind of a different landscape. And I think here you can see both of them. Right? So you see that word in the middle, circumstances. So that's what happened. Let's say we have the videotape. You can't change that. That's what happened, right? And it looks like we could perceive a given set of circumstances, something that happened in two different ways, two different lenses. Like we got one set of glasses, then we put on our other set of glasses, and it looks like we have a different experience. Where there's different kind of thematic structures to the narrative we're telling ourselves about it, and we're having different emotional experience. Where do you think we'd want to live our lives, right? Which place feels more hopeful, more empowered, more powerful, more sense of greater possibility to live our lives? I think most of us would agree up here. And when we go through this as an experiential exercise, you feel and see that very viscerally. So that would seem to imply that there might be choice involved in terms of whether I experience a given set of circumstances from the lens or the context of the drama zone and have those kind of thoughts in my head and those kind of emotions and feelings, or whether I choose to look at it through the lens of the empowerment zone and have a different experience, maybe a more empowering experience, right? A more affirmative, more life-affirming experience with a greater sense of possibility. So if you agree that there's choice at some point, now it may not, often when we end up down a drama zone, it doesn't feel like we chose to go there. Something happened, I'm just there. I'm having all these kind of thoughts in my head. I'm having all these feelings. I don't even know what happened yet. And then I go, oh, John, you did it, I just find myself there. And it happens to all of us. But would you agree that at some point we have choice about how long we're going to stay down there or whether we're going to get stuck down there? Now, it can be, terrible things happen to human beings. And this is not about going to somebody else and saying, you're stuck in the drama zone. You need to get off it. It has only to do with ourselves, right? Things happen to people. It may be heroic. It may be all but impossible for them to find their way out of that. But, people do. And people have turned the most horrific circumstances you can imagine, have turned it around and found a way to empower themselves and move forward in their lives. Viktor Frankl wrote his book, Man's Search for Meaning, out of the experience of being in the death camp, the worst death camp, Auschwitz of the Nazi Holocaust. And he discovered that even in the most horrific circumstances anybody could possibly imagine being in, that he still had choices. He had a choice over the mindset that he brought to the experience, and that changed everything, right? So this is really all about choice and recognizing choice. So if in fact there is choice, what does that say about the circumstances? Like if the circumstances aren't kind of glued to this context, they're not glued to this context, then the circumstances themselves are what? The circumstances are what? They're neither hot nor cold, they're neither up nor down, they're neutral. So we say circumstances are neutral. Now, can you imagine going through life where you don't feel circumstances are neutral? Circumstance A happens, I got to feel B. Circumstance C happens, I got to feel D. That's just the way it is. That's who I am, and that's the way the world is, and that's the way it should be, by golly. How much freedom do I have? Right? Who's in charge of my life? What's my life being run by? We all live in a kind of space between our childhood conditioning, which we had nothing to say about. We got most of it by the time we were 7, a lot of it by the time we were 3 even. We didn't choose it. The family legacy just got poured into us. And then, they say, good luck, have a good life, try to work out the stuff we couldn't work out, and that's just the human condition. Nobody to blame for it. And I think it's our job as human beings to take what we did receive and try to transform it and pass on something better, more evolved, right? So at any rate, where are we then with this, if we don't recognize choice? On the other hand, if we're going through life and we're always looking for the neutrality, what are my options? Where are my choices? Yeah, I don't like the way that feels, but is there a way I could reframe that, or what could that challenge me to do something else? In other words, I'm always looking for the challenge, the solution, the choice, the option, instead of getting caught in taking it personally and spiraling down into drama, right? A world with much greater possibility. So we say circumstances are neutral, and we recognize that we have choice. So I'm going to skip down here. So that allows us to jump into exploring what we call the empowerment zone, So if you remember back up here, we had that dreaded trauma triangle down here. And you know, if you go back, I know we have available the video, the recording of the session 2 weeks ago, so you can go back and learn all about the drama triangle. You can put it in your search engine, Karpman Drama Triangle. You can learn a lot about it. And so we can learn how to recognize it, how to unhook from it, how to get off it, how to avoid it, all those things. But it's such a powerful dynamic in human life. Maybe we could learn to transform it. Maybe we could take that triangle and flip it on its head and take it up into the empowerment zone and turn it into something different. So I'm going to flip us down here to first. Well, let's see. Well, I'll stick on this for a minute. So how do we make that shift? As I said before, we embrace choice. We embrace choice. We recognize we're making choices all the time, and our choices have impact on others and consequences for ourselves. And who's making the choices? I am. Right? Sometimes it may not feel like choice. Sometimes it may feel like my choices are very narrow, but I always have choices. And at the very least, like Viktor Frankl discovered, I always have a choice about the attitude I'm going to hold around something, even a terrible situation. And that can really change everything about my experience. And so I'm going to embrace ownership. I'm going to embrace accountability, which means I keep my agreements. I'm going to work at being open and real and genuine with others. So if we have a personal or professional relationship and I own my stuff, I don't blame you for my stuff. I don't project it on you. If I keep my agreements with you and I'm willing to be open, real, and genuine with you, what does that create? It creates trust. And that creates what we call authentic relationship. Now, we can find lots of relationships in the drama zone, lots of drama zone buddies. A lot of people out there want to get on the drama zone and play that game all day long. That's not the relationships we're talking about. We're talking about authentic relationships, which for me is the blue. We're social beings. If we want amazing lives, we need amazing relationships, powerful relationships, nurturing relationships, supportive, empowering relationships. And this is where we create them. And when we live in the empowerment zone, we're experiencing that sense of limitless possibility. And we're developing greater unconditional confidence in ourselves and our own being. And we're developing more resilience. So this is how we get there. And we're making that shift again from the drama zone where we have these strategies that work on some level, right? We get emotional payoffs when we blame. Feels good to blame somebody else. Feels good to chew on that resentment. Feels good to justify. I had to do it. Of course I was justified. I'm right. You know, we get hooked. This is like, I call this the junk food of the emotional world. Quick payoff, lasting suffering. It works, so we wouldn't do it. We get these emotional payoffs, quick payoff, but it's like grabbing for the candy bar. You get the, 10 seconds of pleasure, and then you got to get on the treadmill for 3 hours to work off all those calories, right? So quick payoff, lasting suffering. We make the shift by shifting into self-responsibility, accountability, being real and genuine. But how do we do that when we find ourselves stuck down here? When I find myself stuck down in the drama zone, well, I ask myself one simple question. One simple question. I may be in a terrible situation. Maybe my boss is a tyrant. Maybe, I'm experiencing a lot of unfairness and, my coworkers are acting unfairly or whatever's going on, right? Terrible situation. Or, maybe imagine if one of us is Ukraine right now and our whole country is falling apart and it feels unjust and criminal and it is. But what can get me out of the victim mindset and back into solution-based thinking and creative thinking, even in my own enlightened self-interest, to take care of myself, my kids, my family, and make the best decisions I can to move my own life forward. My short-term need might want to be to punch somebody in the nose, or grab a gun and shoot somebody. But is that going to be in my long-term interest? I mean, maybe in a war, I don't know. But in general, if we're really upset with somebody at work and we fly off the handle and do something like that, we may get sued, we may end up in jail. It might feel good in the moment, but is that my long-term interest? So when we're talking about, what we're talking about here is, can we act in our long-term interests, our enlightened self-interest, which usually ends up being in the interest of everyone, because at the long term, we're social beings. We get our needs met socially. So when I think long-term, in my own enlightened self-interest, it usually becomes in the interest of everyone. So how do I get there? I ask myself this simple question: what can I do? It seems so simple, so obvious, but it just works. I'm stewing, I feel powerless, I'm angry, I feel helpless, I'm blaming, I'm justifying. I remember, okay, I'm stuck. This is drama. I'm stuck. Okay, what can I do? What can I do? And I just stay with that question, because there's always a million things we can do. There's a million ways we can approach any person, any situation. And the minute I ask myself that question and stick with that question, I'm back in the realm of possibility. I'm out of that. The world of drama zone is about it's disempowerment, it's powerlessness, it's problems, limitations, right? And this world is all about possibility, endless possibility, and solution-based thinking. So that's just one magical thing you can remember every time you feel upset or penned in or hemmed in or treated badly or feeling helpless, powerless, victimized, or you just feel stuck. Just ask that question and just stay with that question. And sooner or later, that question is going to take you to some creative ideas that will move you out of that situation and into a better situation. What can I do? So here's the empowerment triangle. I'll talk about this a little bit, and then I want us to break up into some quick groups to have a discussion about this. I realize this has been kind of a quick ride, and if you want to go into this a lot more deeply experientially, I have a whole online course on this, and we sometimes do live trainings around this where we can do it more experientially. But tonight's a good introduction. So here's the triangle flipped on its end, and you see at the top the co-creator or the co-creative mindset. So how do I get to out of the victim mindset to the co-creative mindset? I ask myself that question: what can I do? I call it co-creative because we can't control the world, but we do have a relationship. There's some relationship between who I'm being and what I'm doing and how I'm being and what I experience and what comes back to me. It's not always linear, but we know there's a relationship. So, that co-creative mindset. And then instead of being a persecutor and trying to get my needs met by controlling, dominating others when I feel helpless and powerless, can I learn to be a good challenger? Now, this has actually two aspects of it. When I experience a persecutor, when I find somebody that's persecuting me, maybe I feel my boss is a tyrant, somebody's persecuting me, instead of seeing them as a persecutor and becoming a victim or being stuck in a victim mindset, can I just see them as a challenger? They're rattling my cage. Okay, I'm either going to let them take me down or I'm going to rise above it. So I'm going to get bigger, stronger, smarter, wiser, and I'm going to let they'll be the instigator to leverage my growth. I'm going to take advantage of that. A lot of different cultural traditions have ideas like this. In the Toltec tradition in Mexico, they talk about a petty tyrant showing up in your life. It's like the best thing that could happen to you, to have your back up against the wall, because you're either going to go down or go up. And you'll be able to leverage personal growth in ways that you never would without that petty tyrant being there. In the country of India, they have a thing called a Bengali tea boy. Evidently, Bengali tea boys, probably unfairly so, but have a reputation for having very nasty dispositions. So they say, if you want to become enlightened, get a Bengali tea boy, move them into your house. It's like, how does the pearl form in the oyster? That irritant gets in there, and then the oyster secretes that, and it becomes this beautiful pearl, right? So we need to be challenged. So we take it as a challenge, and we use it to leverage growth. And then we learn to be good challengers ourselves. Can we learn to challenge ourselves without persecuting ourselves? Can we learn to challenge others without making them wrong or making ourselves wrong? If you want to, really punch your ticket for a limitless career, professional career, learn to become a really good challenger, that you're good at challenging yourself, teams, others, without making anybody wrong, and people feeling good about being challenged. That's the highest level leadership skill there is. And instead of being rescuers, where we're ostensibly helping people, but doing it from up here, like, don't forget who's the rescuer here, who's the picture of the savior. Yeah, don't get back down here. You're the victim, I'm the rescuer. Instead of being caught up in that mindset, can I learn to support people like this, eyeball to eyeball? Truly be a friend, a mentor, or we call a coach, using the dreaded sports field metaphor here. But, the coach can't get on the playing field and take that final, shot, with the penalty shot or kick the field goal or shoot the last basket at the buzzer. The coach has to stay on the sideline, let the players play the game. The coach can support and be a great cheerleader and provide resources and training and inspiration, but the coach has to let the players play the game, right? So can we see people here, even when people are really suffering and falling apart, instead of seeing them as broken, can we see their wholeness and just hold space for them, a safe space where they can do their own work and come back and be empowered? Because often, when we're trying to help people and save people and we have that, our ego needs mixed up, we're actually kind of keeping them down very often, right? So can we learn to become good coaches, good challengers for ourselves? We can learn to coach ourselves effectively, learn to challenge ourselves effectively, and then learn to coach and challenge others as well. This is what we call the empowerment triangle. You know, we all have a drama triangle going on between our ears. We beat ourselves up, we rescue ourselves, we save ourselves, we play the victim vis-a-vis ourselves, right? And when you got a lot of people running around with drama triangle between your ears, guess what we create with each other? So it's just as important to learn to be in a co-creative mindset with myself and learn to be a good challenger and a good coach with myself to begin with. And then I can learn to be a really good, effective challenger and coach with others. Again, these are some of the highest leadership skills there are. So that's the empowerment triangle and the radical responsibility model. And you know, when the more time we spend up here, our world starts to look and feel like that. And the more time we spend in a drama zone, we get like that. And we all know that work cultures can get pretty negative, and public safety cultures are kind of infamous for getting pretty negative. Well, you got a lot of people running around with a lot of high stress, you know, spending a lot of time hooked into fight or flight. You got a lot of trauma exposure. And, you know, unless you proactively do something other, the culture can get full of drama and pretty negative, but it doesn't have to stay that way. We can co-create something else with each other.